Good afternoon. You're listening to My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Today, we are going to be talking about taking responsibility for our relationship. And when I say our relationship, I mean our father-daughter relationship.
Yeah, my relationship. I look at our relationship as my relationship, so I take ownership of it. And I don't think that most parents give themselves permission to see it like that, to be able to open up a new possibility that the relationship that we both engage in is my relationship, and then from your end that it's your relationship. If we hide behind it's our relationship, it's very easy for me to sit back and expect you to contribute to it from what I think is fair, rather than saying, no, it's my relationship, and it's the relationship is just an open space for me to contribute to it and mold it and kind of manipulate it in a healthy way to be able to give us both, dividends, to be able to give us some payoffs and some goodies from it, as long as it's there for me to take ownership of it, take responsibility for it, and then give into it.
Yeah, and as you were explaining that, I was thinking that most people assume that relationships are 50-50, and when you kind of think about it, not everybody wants 50-50. Some people are okay with giving 80 while the other person gives 20 because they love that person so much that they're gonna give it as much as they can. So sometimes it's not necessarily 50-50 isn't really what's fair or what's right. It's just what people assume.
Yeah, and I think that if you can be open to the possibility that your job in a relationship is to get yourself to 100 and the other person's job is to get themselves to 100, then a real healthy and extraordinary relationship looks like 100-100, not a 50-50. So I take 100% accountability for my relationship with you, and if I can inspire and empower you to take 100% accountability on your end, then we have just a magnificent relationship where I don't need anything from you. And I know a lot of times people say, so when you say that you don't need anything from my relationship or the relationship, what do you mean by that? Because people can get offended by that. Like, yo, you don't need nothing from me, so you think you're all that. And I want to focus on the distinction of need. Being in a relationship because you need something is not healthy. It's like having an addiction. I want you to be in a relationship where you're in the relationship not needing anything, but freed up to be able to not need anything from the other person. So it frees you up to be able to give to the other person so that you can contribute. Now, in order to be operating from that place, we both have to be operating from a context of being whole and complete. Like, I've worked through my past, I've worked on my major insecurities, I've let go of all the fears and the doubts, and I'm surrendering all that stuff, and I'm healing myself so that I'm whole and complete. And standing from whole and complete, now I can be a full service to you in the relationship.
Yeah, and one of the things I think would be kind of cool for us to go over, maybe not in this segment, but the next one, would just be some of the things that I know that I wrote down ahead of time that I want to take responsibility for, and then maybe you can come up with some of your own too.
Absolutely, for sure. I think that when we're talking about speaking into our relationship or my relationship with you, some of the things that are important for me is making sure that my communication with you is accurate. Is that a right word? Accurate. And that it's being perceived in the way that I intend for you to understand it. And what I mean by that, and a lot of times I've been practicing this art of communication in a way that I'm always done with what I'm saying. I'll always ask you, what did you hear me say? And when I say that, sometimes it can be perceived as that from the other person. They can misperceive it and hear it like, what, do you think I'm dumb? Like I can't hear what you're saying? And that's not why I asked the question. The reason why I asked the question, what did you hear me say, is because I want to make sure that I'm being responsible for not only saying the message, but making sure that it's landing on your end so that it's close to being accurate. Because you got to remember, we all have the ability to perceive and create our own reality through our perceptions. So what I say might not necessarily be perceived on your end 100%. It might not be landing 100% on your end. I can say something from 100% on my end, and you can be misperceiving it, only landing at 40%.
Yeah, I think we just always assume that people are in our heads and hearing exactly what we're saying and the way we mean it. Because when you think about it, parents, when they have little kids, they tell them, okay, go outside and check the mail, but don't go any further, and then come back inside. And then the kid's like, okay. And, the mom's saying, okay, what are you going to do? Okay, I'm going to check the mail, and that's it. I'm going to come inside. So they make sure that your kids understand, because you know that they're young and they're little, and they might not know what you're talking about. And then there's some point where you just stop doing that and stop checking in to make sure that your kids are clear on what you're saying, and they just assume that we always know what you're talking about.
And it's a great word when you say assume. We live in the assumption at a certain point that other people understand what you're saying, or that they understand that the words that are coming out of your mouth have the same meaning that you have for them. And that's not necessarily the truth. And we find that out when there's always misunderstandings, and miscommunication always comes from, well, I thought you meant this. And then you always have the common argument where the person says, but I didn't say that. And so we have to really sit down, and when I'm asking you, what did you hear me say? I'm asking you that because when you're repeating back to me, I want to know that when you walk away from me, that what I had said actually landed that way, so that if there's any kind of error, when you come back and we're having that discussion, I can even bring it up to you and say, and when I asked you to repeat it, you even said back to me that I was to go just to get the mail and not go any further. And then once I can now hold you accountable for what you said back to me, you go, oh yeah, you're right, you did say that. So it just helps in the ability to communicate more effectively, to be able to take responsibility for not only what I'm saying, but how it's being perceived also.
And not just acknowledging, oh yeah, you're right, you did say that, but oh yeah, you're right, I kind of agreed to it by saying it back to you.
That's right.
Saying that I heard what you said and I agree to these terms, and then if you don't, then you either forgot or whatever your excuse is.
Right. Now, on the flip side of that coin, I also get to take responsibility for making sure that what you're communicating with me is also accurate by how I'm receiving it in the way that you intended to have me perceive it. So that means when you're giving me instructions or you're saying certain things to me, if I'm not waiting for you, if you haven't learned the art of asking me, what did you hear me say? I can now say to you, let me repeat what I heard you say. And so now I can give you back verbatim of what it means to me, of what your instructions were or what your request was. And this is why this is important. Because as I'm asking you permission to give back to you what I heard you say, and then when I start to say it out loud, I hear myself say it. I hear myself repeat it a second time. Have you ever had somebody give you instructions and when you walk away you go, oh man, what did he say, turn left or turn right? Right?
Yeah.
But if you would have said, okay, let me repeat this back to you. What you're asking me to do is go to the corner, make a left, and when I get to the tree, make a right. Now, by me saying it out loud a second time, and I'm hearing myself say it, I actually ingrain it into my mind to another level. It now, because I'm hearing it from my voice, it's almost like I'm authoring it. When you're saying it, I can get parent deaf. So parents, when you're asking your kids to do something and they have you in a box called parent deaf, they're not really hearing you. It's going in one ear and out the other. You know that old saying, it goes in one ear and out the other. That's not really landing. So an effective tool, whether it's parent to son or daughter, or just you and your husband and wife, when you're done communicating, practice asking them, what did you hear me say? And then when they say it back to you out loud and they hear themselves, what they're doing is they're ingraining it into their mind at another level. So they're taking ownership of it because they're hearing it from their voice.
Yeah, and that's also, I know that we did that like when we were in high school and teenagers, me and my siblings, but I think if we did that more as kids and into our high school and our teenagers, and even now you still do that to us now, even here at work, that happens, that goes on, and it's based on results. I think it's very effective. So it's kind of like makes me wonder how much of a better communicator and more understanding I would be had I done it when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, all growing up.
Yeah, same for me. I think that if I would have learned that ability to do that and communicate like that, that there would be so many, I would be able to have really developed my ability to listen and hear people, and really retain that information, so that my first attempt is a lot more accurate than making several mistakes over and over again. And I get it about making mistakes, that's how we learn. But one of the things of making mistakes and learning is I want to make one mistake and learn from it, not make 10 mistakes and then finally 5-10 years later I have that learning experience, rather than I'm going to do it one time, learn the mistake, make the adjustments, and then course correct my ability to communicate more effectively.
And I'm just thinking out loud, but what about the people who, because I know I'm like this sometimes, people who don't want to admit they're wrong. It's almost impossible to take responsibility for something without admitting you're wrong, right?
Well, that's going to take a new awareness, an ability for somebody that you love, that cares for you, to point that out to you, someone that you know that has your back, and someone that you bring your wall down and let them in. You appreciate their advice and you kind of respect them or admire them, to pull you aside and say, hey, maybe this ability to not ever be wrong, or never to apologize, or never really be open to new possibilities, is getting in your way from growing and maturing and evolving and actually having those amazing and extraordinary relationships that you say that you want. So I think pointing that out to somebody and have them be more mindful of maybe me being right or fighting to be right, or always having to be right about things, is something that's kind of sabotaging me from growing and really having the kind of relationships that I desire.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of probably tricks around it for when you start off, like saying, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to come off that way, or for you to perceive it like that. And I know it's a little bit, sometimes it can come off a little bit passive to say, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but that's not what I meant. So maybe just starting off something simple and light like that, and then it'll help you work your way up to being able to take responsibility for the things that you've said. Yeah,
it's a learning process, and it takes it takes some baby steps. But I know that as you start to take baby steps, you start to become really good at it. You get to really articulate yourself in a way that when people interact with you, you start unconsciously teaching other people how to speak a little bit more clearly, and then both together you're both fine-tuning your words, because words are important. Words are distinctions. There's a distinction between left and right, and sometimes if I say just go that way, I don't know to go left or right. If you tell me just to go that way, what does that mean? So you have to tell somebody go, and then when you get to a certain point, turn left. So you have to learn, if you want to be have relationships that thrive and flourish, you have to learn how to communicate more effectively. And I don't know if people necessarily see that value or not. I don't see all the different classes that, like, the city offers these classes to communicate, or you go online to some of these different online courses for communicate. It's not taking off. People don't really put a lot of emphasis on learning how to communicate more effectively, but yet everybody's complaining that so and so in their life isn't in sync with them, or my kid's not listening to me, or my child's misbehaving. And I want to open up the possibility that you need to learn how to communicate more effectively. You got to work on yourself a little bit.
Yeah, and going back to how you were saying that the city or schools or whatever are offering these classes in communication, sometimes it's not exactly what you think it is, because sometimes communication has to do a lot with your emotions and how you are, your beingness, and sometimes it's just about how to talk to people in a business setting, or how to talk to people in general, or in front of a crowd. So sometimes you need to look a little, or I would look a little further past classes and start looking into workshops and maybe things that you normally wouldn't be looking into.
Yeah, like what? If you saw an ad for a class that says Communication 101 by this one author, or this one, language specialist or whatever, what was the first thing to come to your mind? And I want you to be honest. You see, Communication 101, it's $19.95 for a 3-hour class. Well, what goes through your mind? What do you honestly say to yourself?
I think it's that very textbook type of, to how to talk to people in general, talk to strangers or in front of big crowds. I don't think of it as being emotional or affectionate or loving or caring or compassionate. I don't see those things pop into my mind.
So when you see Communication 101 as an advertising for a workshop or a class or a seminar, you don't necessarily see that there's some stories in your perception that you make up that get in the way of what you're hearing and what you're saying, and that you understanding that and learning that and having the breakthrough in that area could transcend your ability to create extraordinary relationships with people that you love the most. You don't see that possibility.
No, I never saw that possibility.
Well, it's out there. If you're willing to trust that communication is so big, it's so enormous, and it's so deep that there's so many different levels for you to access and become a master at, and it could take lifetimes to become a master at really learning the ability and the art of communicating effectively. And I think people downplay it. People just think, well, I know how to talk, I know how to speak. It's them that they don't know how to listen. They might need to take a class to better understand and listen to what I'm saying. And that's why today, the conversation we're having is about taking responsibility for our relationship rather than being the victim and blaming you. So I want to take responsibility for the words that I say in my communication, so that I don't just assume that you know what I'm saying, and then when you mess up or when you don't actually take my words and be effective in whatever instructions I'm giving you, then I don't get to be the victim and blame you for it.
In the whole realm of things, we're talking about relationships and taking responsibility for them, but the word that keeps coming up is communication, and I want to point out that communication isn't just how you talk and how you speak. It's a big part is how you listen and how you interpret things, because I think we kind of brushed over the listening part, but the listening part's probably the most important. I would say.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so deep, and the possibilities of listening and being a great listener. It also has to do with your physical and how you're showing up in the physical realm, standing in front of someone. Like, we can be having a conversation just right now, us having a conversation, and if just for 3 seconds I look away from you and look at my computer to find some of my notes, I can throw you off, correct?
Yeah.
Like, you can be thinking about something, right? Because right now we're making eye contact, so we can be having this conversation, and with eye contact we get locked in and we get into a zone. I know that when we're on the radio, and sometimes I've been known to talk really fast, and I tell people I just get passionate, or I get excited, or I get in a zone, or I get on a topic and I want to just embellish in it. And when I'm doing that and you're making eye contact with me, you feed me this energy, and I can just keep going. The minute you look over at Andrew, or someone walks by the door and you look over there, or even you just move away from the mic and like cough or drink a water, it throws me off. And it's not just me, it's the art of communication. Mm-hmm. When you're communicating with someone, there's always two people in play. There's two players in it, and you have to realize that you're one of the players. And if you just look at your watch for a minute or look over their shoulder, you can totally throw somebody off. And someone that has something that they want to communicate, and they were there at the time, and they were telling you this amazing story, and they got all the juicy details, and the minute you check out or look at your watch or look away, you totally get the person, you throw them off, they go in their mind, and they start to forget.
It's funny how looking at your watch is perceived as rude, because all you're doing is looking at your watch. Hey, stay tuned for more of My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.